Doug, Nicolas Sarkozy's speech in Toulon lasted about an hour. He touched on lots of themes, immigration, retirement, but it was mainly about the euro, wasn't it? Did he say anything new?
Well, in a nutshell, this was a 52-minute speech, and I'll play the role of cynic and say there was nothing new in terms of concrete substance. There were very fine words in this speech. He addressed what a lot of people are calling some of the very hard truths and the realities. He didn't try to in any way dodge the fact that France and Europe as a whole are very much immersed in one of the worst debt crises they've ever seen, that there's been a total breakdown in confidence, and that this confidence threatens the entire future of the euro, and that he hammered away at what he sees as sort of the three pillars of that solution, which are more work, more effort, and better controlling France's expenses. Now, that said, the anything new part, not really. Nicolas Sarkozy, there was a lot of hype going into this speech. He loves these occasions, these big occasions where he's seen as being able to sort of manipulate the message, trying to control the message. He does this a lot on TV broadcasts where he sort of cherry picks the journalist to interview him. In this case, he was before thousands of people who were very much sympathetic to a lot of what he had to say, whether immigration, tax reform, and the euro. He is still very his views with Angela Merkel, the other tandem in this two-motor Europe so far, very divergent because, yes, he basically seemed to be ceding ground to Merkel in the sense that he acknowledged the need to better coordinate policies, to work together. He basically said that a sovereignty of a country is better protected when you work as allies than if you work all alone. But at the same time, he stuck very much to his vision that France did not want to give up some fundamental sovereignty. He does not endorse the view which is much more solidly held by Angela Merkel, of a supranational Europe that is ceding a lot more control to the center and enforcing that fiscal discipline from the center. Nicolas Sarkozy is very much a proponent of the idea of a Europe of two speeds, maybe even three speeds, where you have that Franco-German tandem at its core, that intergovernmental approach. He likes that, working with other leaders, other strong countries, to try to sort of be the engine that leads the rest of Europe forward. And there's some people that say that what you really need is an across-the-board ceding of sovereign rights of where it comes to budget and finance in order to make Europe work at all. We haven't really heard that from Sarkozy in this speech today. It seems that he's still sticking to that vision of wanting to gain the sovereignty and at the same time wanting to have a more harmonized policy. Eat your cake and have it too.
Yeah, he's never liked the idea, has he, of Brussels approving the French budget. Now, Angela Merkel is set to speak quite shortly. What can we expect to hear from her today?
Yeah, Angela Merkel next, up at the plate, if you want to say. She will be talking to the lower house of parliament, to the lawmakers there in the Bundestag. Merkel's vision, as we know, is to basically allow the European Central Bank to keep an independent role, but not to be, as many economists have called for it, to be that so-called lender of last resort. She doesn't want to see the ECB essentially printing money to buy bonds to save Europe indefinitely. Germans see that as the road to more hyperinflation. We know about their historical fears surrounding that, going back to the 30s, and they want to do anything to ward off that specter and preserve stability. What Angela Merkel does want to see is much more fiscal restraint, much more fiscal coordination, much more fiscal discipline, budgetary discipline at an EU-wide level. She has been a proponent of basically enforcing the Stability Pact rules, whereby states that are seen as miscreants, that don't abide by the rules, could perhaps end up being hauled before the European Court of Justice. Now, that's obviously an idea that France is very much opposed to, but the baseline of Angela Merkel's speech today is likely going to be that unless Europe is able to, on a Europe-wide level, get its fiscal budgetary act together, there's no going forward with the euro. There's no actual reason to go forward with the euro because it will be built on very, very wobbly, shaky foundations. And this is where Merkel and Sarkozy still haven't been able to quite see eye to eye. Sarkozy still favoring sort of the solution of Eurobonds, still favoring perhaps a more muscular role for the European Central Bank. So there's a lot of gaps between them at this point that they're going to have to hammer out between now and that meeting on Monday.
Sure. So you've got the two leaders of Europe's two economic powerhouses really trying to show they're both absolutely in control of the situation. But there's another factor, isn't there? It's the European Central Bank, and that could prove to be the deciding factor. And you've got Mario Draghi, the new president of the ECB, really flexing his muscles as well at the moment.
Yeah, flexing his muscles. I mean, Mario Draghi has so far, he has there's been a policy by which the European Central Bank has been buying the bonds of distressed countries, those countries really up against this debt wall right now. The idea behind that is by the ECB buying up those bonds, it helps limit the spreads between, say, their country's bonds and German debt. They'll keep that a narrow range. The ECB, like I said, the economists who want the ECB to really be that lender of last resort, to really step in there and be that firewall against a total collapse of Europe. Draghi has not come out and said the ECB is ready to play that role, but far from it. And he's actually said just the opposite, that he wants the ECB to have a limited policy of bond buying. He doesn't see this as something that could be sustained indefinitely. That said, my hunch is that the markets don't quite believe that when push comes to shove, the ECB won't act a lot more aggressively and a lot more forcefully. And Mario Draghi has hinted that if you have the fiscal consolidation, that budgetary discipline as a prerequisite, exactly the same kind of budgetary discipline that Angela Merkel wants to see, then the ECB would be able to perhaps play a more forceful role. And perhaps the markets will read that as, well, if all hell breaks loose, the ECB will ultimately be willing to step in, print some money, buy up the bonds, and do what no one else has been able to do, including that European Financial Stability Fund, which has nowhere near enough money, and that is really be the firewall that Europe is lacking at this moment.
All right, so some key days ahead for Europe. Thank you very much indeed to Douglas Herbert from our International Affairs desk. Well, thousands of miles away on the other side of Europe, there was a fresh fury on the streets of Greece on Thursday.